The Copacabana was electric on the night of March 14th, 1948. The legendary nightclub on East 61st Street pulsed with post-war energy. Men in sharp suits and fedoras, women in elegant dresses with victory rolls still fashionable, the air thick with cigarette smoke and expensive perfume. The sound of clinking champagne glasses mixed with big band music, creating a symphony of New York excess. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across white tablecloths, and the stage lights illuminated a performance space that had hosted everyone from Frank Sinatra to the Andrews Sisters. But Dean Martin wasn't those people. Not yet. He stood backstage in the cramped dressing room he shared with three other acts, adjusting his bow tie in a cracked mirror. At 31 years old, Dean Paul Crocetti, still transitioning from his birth name to his stage identity, was handsome in that effortless Italian way, but his tuxedo was rented, and the shine on his shoes came from careful polish work, not wealth. His dark hair was slicked back perfectly, and when he smiled, audiences melted. But behind that smile lived a working-class kid from Steubenville, Ohio, who'd worked as a croupier, a boxer, and done things he didn't like to remember, just to eat. Tonight's show mattered. The Copa room was packed with 450 people, industry insiders mixed with mob figures and socialites. Dean had fought for this slot. 2 songs, middle of the lineup, $175 for the week. It wasn't the headliner spot, but it was the Copacabana. If he impressed the right people, maybe he could finally afford to bring his mother to New York. Maybe he could stop borrowing suits. Maybe he could become someone. His partnership with Jerry Lewis was still new. They'd been working together for 2 years, creating chaos and chemistry in small clubs. But the big break hadn't come yet. Jerry was performing at a different venue tonight, which meant Dean was alone. No comedy safety net, just his voice and whatever charm he could summon. The stage manager knocked. 5 minutes, Dean. He nodded, took a breath, and thought about what his mother Angela used to tell him before she passed. Dino, you have a gift. Don't let anyone take it from you. She died when he was young, but her voice still guided him. Dignity, kindness, strength that didn't need to shout. Dean walked toward the stage entrance, passing waiters in white jackets carrying trays of champagne and shrimp cocktails. The crowd buzzed with anticipation. The previous act, a magician, had bombed. Dean needed to bring them back. This was his shot. Everything was going well. The audience was ready for something smooth, something romantic, something to make them forget about rationing and war memories. Dean had prepared That's Amore, still working on the arrangement, not yet the hit it would become, and a ballad that showcased his voice. This was Dean at his best, the cool, the charm, the effortless talent that would one day make him a legend. But what you're about to witness isn't about the performance. It's about the man behind the microphone, the man who valued dignity over safety, principle over survival. If you've ever wondered what real courage looks like when you have nothing to lose except your soul, stay with this story. Drop a like if you're ready to see Dean Martin at his most fearless, back when he was just a struggling singer who refused to bow. Because in 30 seconds, someone was going to walk into his dressing room and test him in a way that would define the rest of his life. Dean finished his set to genuine applause. Not a standing ovation, but real appreciation. He'd connected. The club manager nodded approvingly from the wings. Maybe, Dean thought, maybe this was the beginning. He returned to the dressing room, loosening his bow tie, still riding the adrenaline. The other performers had cleared out, gone home or to other gigs. It was just Dean, a bare light bulb, and the lingering smell of cheap cologne and hope. That's when the door opened without a knock. 3 men walked in. The first one Dean recognized immediately. Vincent "Vinny" Knuckles Costello, a mid-level enforcer for the Luciano crime family. Vinny was short, thick-necked, with a face that looked like it had stopped too many punches. He wore an expensive suit that didn't quite fit his brutal frame, and his eyes carried the dead calm of someone who'd done things Dean didn't want to imagine. The two men behind him were muscle, larger, younger, with the posture of men who existed to intimidate. Dean's heart rate spiked, but he kept his face neutral. "Gentlemen, I don't think we have a meeting scheduled." Vinny smiled without warmth. "Dean Martin, heard good things about your voice." He sat down in the room's only chair without being invited, his men flanking him like bookends. "You put on a nice show out there. Real nice. The kind of show that could make money." "I hope so," Dean said carefully. "That's the idea. See, that's what I wanted to talk about. Money." Vinny pulled out a cigarette, lit it slowly, let the smoke curl toward the water-stained ceiling. "This club, it's under protection. You know what that means?" Dean knew exactly what it meant. The Copacabana, like most New York nightclubs, paid the mob for protection, which really meant paying them not to burn the place down or hurt the customers. But Dean was just a performer. He didn't own anything. "I'm just a singer," Dean said. "I don't own the club." Nah, you misunderstand." Vinny leaned forward. "See, we protect the club. But talented performers? They need protection too. From accidents, from bad reviews, from losing their voice, if you know what I mean." The threat hung in the air like the cigarette smoke. Dean felt his stomach tighten. This wasn't about the club. This was about him. Personal extortion. "You're a talented kid," Vinny continued. "You could go places, but talent needs guidance, management, and management costs money. So here's how this works. You give us 50% of everything you make, every gig, every paycheck, every tip. In return, we make sure you get good slots, that club owners treat you right, that your career flourishes." 50%. Dean was barely making rent. 50% would mean he'd never escape poverty, never bring his family to New York, never be anything more than a mob-controlled puppet. The room felt smaller. Dean could hear his own breathing, could feel the weight of the decision crushing down on him. One of the muscle guys cracked his knuckles, a deliberate sound. "And if I say no?" Dean asked quietly. Vinny's smile widened. "Then you're making a mistake. A big mistake. See, we're offering you an opportunity here. Without us, bad things happen. Vocal cords are fragile, hands can break. A guy could fall down some stairs and never sing again." He stood up, walked closer to Dean. "We ain't asking, kid. This is how it works. You're either with us or you're finished in this town." Dean looked at Vinny's face, saw the absolute certainty there. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a declaration. The two muscle guys shifted, ready. But Dean had grown up in Steubenville, where his father worked at the barber shop and his mother cleaned houses. He'd been poor before. He'd been hungry before. He'd survived by his wits and his voice, and something his mother had taught him echoed in his mind. "Some things you cannot sell, Dino. Your soul is one of them." "I need time to think," Dean said, buying himself maybe a day. Vinny shook his head. "You got 10 seconds. After that, my boys help you decide." The room went silent. You could hear the muffled music from the club stage above, the distant laughter of wealthy patrons who had no idea a man's life was being crushed in the basement dressing room. Dean's hands were steady, but his mind was racing. This was the moment. This was the test. He had two options, and both were terrible. Option A: agree. Give them 50%. Become a mob asset. Survive, but live as a slave. Sing, but never truly be free. Make money, but never keep it. Watch his dreams get cut in half every single night for the rest of his career. Option B: refuse. Risk everything. Potentially lose his voice, his hands, his ability to perform. Maybe end up in the East River. Definitely end up blacklisted from every mob-connected club in New York, which was almost every club worth playing. Dean thought about his mother, thought about the note she'd left him before she died, the note he still carried in his wallet. Real strength is being kind when you could be cruel. Real power is standing up when you could bow down. He looked at Vinnie Knuckles, looked at the muscle, looked at the cheap dressing room mirror that reflected a man at a crossroads. And Dean made his choice. No, he said quietly. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Vinnie's expression didn't change immediately. He seemed almost confused, as if he'd heard wrong. What did you just say? I said no. Dean's voice was calm, measured, the same voice he used to sing love songs. I'm not giving you 50%. I'm not giving you anything. One of the muscle guys stepped forward, fists clenched. Vinnie held up a hand, stopping him. Kid, I don't think you understand the situation you're in. I understand perfectly, Dean said. You want to own me. You want to take half of everything I earn, not because you've earned it, but because you can. Because you're bigger and meaner and you think that makes you powerful. He took a step closer to Vinnie, not aggressive, just present. But my mother taught me something. She taught me that real power isn't about who you can hurt. It's about what you're willing to protect. And I'm protecting my dignity. Your dignity? Vinnie laughed, a harsh sound. Your dignity ain't gonna fix your broken legs, kid. Maybe not, Dean admitted. But I've been poor. I've been nobody. I've eaten government cheese and worn my father's old shoes. I've survived worse than you can imagine. You can take my money. I barely have any. You can threaten my career. I'm still climbing. But you can't take my voice. You can't take who I am. He looked Vinnie straight in the eyes. So do what you're gonna do, but I'm not bowing to you. The room seemed to vibrate with tension. The muscle guys looked at Vinnie, waiting for the signal. Dean could see the calculation in Vinnie's eyes. This nobody singer was challenging him, and challenges couldn't go unanswered. Vinnie's face hardened. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. He nodded to his men. Teach him. The first muscle guy moved fast, grabbed Dean by the collar, slammed him against the wall. Pain shot through Dean's spine, but he didn't cry out. The second guy produced a baseball bat from somewhere. Dean hadn't even seen where it came from. Last chance, Vinnie said. 50%, or we start with your hands. Dean looked at the bat, looked at his hands, the hands that buttoned his shirts, that gestured while he sang, that might never work properly again. Fear flooded through him, real and visceral. But underneath the fear was something else, something his mother had planted, a refusal to be owned. I've been poor before, Dean said, his voice strained but steady. Have you ever had nothing, Vinnie? Because that's what I came from. Nothing. And I built something with my voice, with my hands, with my dignity. You can break them. You can destroy them. But you can't make me give them to you willingly. He took a shaky breath. You want my hands? Take them. But you'll never own me. The guy with the bat raised it. Now here's the question historians still debate. Was Dean Martin recklessly brave in this moment, or did he calculate that even mobsters might respect courage over cowardice? Was this the desperation of a man with nothing to lose, or the strategy of a performer who understood psychology better than violence? Let us know what you think in the comments. Was this fearless principle, or brilliant calculation? Either way, Vinnie Knuckles had a choice to make. The bat hung in the air. Time seemed to freeze. Dean closed his eyes, not in fear, but in acceptance. If this was how it ended, at least it ended with his soul intact. And then a voice cut through the tension. Anthony! Anthony Vincent Costello! You put that bat down right now! Everyone turned. Standing in the doorway was a small Italian woman in her 60s, wearing a simple house dress and clutching a worn purse. Her hair was silver, pulled back in a bun, and her face, weathered and kind, carried an expression of absolute fury. Ma? Vinnie's voice cracked with shock. Don't you ma me? She marched into the room with the confidence of someone who'd raised 5 boys in Brooklyn and feared absolutely nothing. You were gonna hurt this boy? This boy? She pointed at Dean. That's Dean Martin. I listened to him on the radio. He's got the voice of an angel." The muscle guy holding Dean let go immediately. The one with the bat lowered it like it had turned into a snake. Mrs. Costello walked right up to her son and slapped him across the face. The sound echoed in the small room. "I raised you better than this. Your father, God rest his soul, is rolling in his grave, shaking down a singer, a boy who makes people happy." She turned to Dean, her expression softening. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Martin. My son, he forgets himself sometimes." Dean, still pressed against the wall, managed a weak smile. "It's okay, Mrs. Costello." "It is not okay." She turned back to Vinny, who looked like a scolded child despite being a grown mob enforcer. "You know what your problem is, Anthony. You think power comes from fear. But real power, comes from respect. This boy just stood up to you. Stood up knowing you could hurt him. And he did it with dignity. That's power. That's strength." She poked Vinny in the chest. "You could learn something from him." Vinny's face was red, torn between embarrassment and anger. His men looked at the floor, trying to become invisible. "Ma, you don't understand business." "I understand decency." Mrs. Costello's voice rose. "Your father came to this country with nothing. Nothing. And he built something through hard work, not through hurting people. You shame his memory." The room went silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. Not tension, but shame. Vinny looked at Dean, then at his mother, then back at Dean. Something shifted in his expression. Not kindness, but a grudging acknowledgement. He gestured to his men. "Let's go." "Not yet," Mrs. Costello said. "First, you apologize." "Ma." "Now, Anthony." Vinny Knuckles, a man who'd broken bones, collected debts, and terrified half of Little Italy, took a deep breath. "I apologize, Mr. Martin. That was inappropriate." Dean nodded slowly, still processing what had just happened. "Apology accepted." Mrs. Costello smiled, satisfied. She walked over to Dean, patted his cheek gently. "You have a beautiful voice, young man. Don't ever let anyone take it from you. And don't ever bow to bullies, not even my son." She turned to Vinny. "Come on, we're going home, and we're having a long talk about what it means to be a man." Vinny and his muscle filed out like scolded children. At the doorway, Vinny paused, looked back at Dean. "You got lucky tonight, Martin. Real lucky." "I know," Dean said quietly. But as Vinny left, there was something else in his expression. Not respect exactly, but recognition. Like he'd seen something in Dean he hadn't expected. Courage, principle, the kind of strength that couldn't be intimidated. Mrs. Costello was the last to leave. She squeezed Dean's hand. "Keep singing, Mr. Martin. The world needs more beauty in it." Then she was gone, and Dean was alone in the dressing room. He slid down the wall, sat on the floor, and let the adrenaline drain out of him. His hands were shaking now, the fear catching up. He could have been killed. He could have been crippled. His career could have ended in this cramped room that smelled like stale cigarettes and broken dreams. But it hadn't. Within hours, the story spread through the New York entertainment underground. Dean Martin, the nobody singer, had told Vinny Knuckles no, had stared down a baseball bat, had refused to bow. Some performers laughed, called him stupid, reckless, lucky. But others, the ones who'd lived under mob control their whole careers, looked at Dean differently, with something like hope. The next week, Dean got a call. The Copa wanted him back. Better slot, better money. The week after that, another club called. Then another. Word was getting around. Dean Martin couldn't be pushed around. Dean Martin had principles. And in an industry built on fear and compromise, that made him different. When Jerry Lewis heard the story, he laughed and called Dean an idiot. But there was pride in his eyes. "You're crazy, Dean, but that's why we're going to make it." And they did. Years later, in 1987, Long after Dean had become one of the biggest stars in the world, a reporter asked him about the early days in New York, about the struggles, the poverty, the dangers of performing in mob-controlled clubs. Dean was 70 years old by then, his face lined but still handsome, his voice softer but still rich. He smiled that famous smile and said, "I made a lot of mistakes when I was young, but I also made one decision that saved my life. I decided that some things were more important than survival." The reporter pressed, "What things?" "Dignity," Dean said simply. "Self-respect. The ability to look at yourself in the mirror and know you didn't sell your soul." He paused, took a sip of his apple juice. He'd never been the drunk people thought he was. "My mother taught me that, and I carried it with me every single day." He never mentioned Vinnie Knuckles by name. Never told the full story of that night in the Copacabana dressing room. Some stories Dean believed were personal, sacred, between him and the person he used to be. But when Dean Martin died on Christmas Day, 1995, among his belongings his daughter found a yellowed piece of paper, folded carefully in his wallet. It had been there for decades, the creases worn soft from handling. The handwriting was faint but readable. His mother's handwriting, from before she died. "Dino, real strength is being kind when you could be cruel. Real power is standing up when you could bow down. Never sell yourself. You are worth more than they will ever offer." But stories like this one, the moments when Dean stood up for dignity when it could have cost him everything, those are the stories that keep his legacy alive. If this moved you, hit that like button and subscribe, because there are dozens more untold Dean Martin stories that deserve to be remembered. Stories of a man who chose courage when it was dangerous, principle when it was expensive, and dignity when it would have been easier to bow. And this legacy? It lives on in everyone who faces their own Vinnie Knuckles moment and chooses to stand. Dean Martin carried his mother's note for 48 years, from the Copacabana dressing room to the heights of Hollywood fame. The words never changed, and neither did he. That's not just Dean's legacy. That's a challenge for all of us. When someone tries to own you, what will you protect? Your comfort or your soul?